Welcome to Dialogue. We are diving deep today into what is, I think, one of the most perplexing cultural shifts of our hyper-modern era. It's this profound and frankly startling return to religion and to spiritual seeking.
And it's happening among a generation that was, for all intents and purposes, raised to believe that efficiency, that data, and material success were the only real gods worth worshiping.
Exactly. We're talking about highly educated, highly successful, hyper-optimized people. The very people who maybe just a few years ago would have publicly dismissed anything spiritual as myth or superstition.
Or just outdated technology.
Mm.
It's a seismic shift, and the mission here really is to unpack that core paradox. Why are people who have reached the peak of modern achievement, the six-figure careers, the optimized dating profiles, the maximized productivity schedules, why are they suddenly turning to mysticism?
And to breathwork, ancient philosophy, even explicitly talking about God.
We need to understand the structural failures that created this need. And crucially, we have to look at what this new spiritual landscape actually looks like.
Because what we're seeing is definitely not the traditional faith many of us might have grown up with.
No, not at all.
This isn't that institutional, obedience-driven dogma. It's not what some are calling religion 1.0. This new spirituality, it comes packaged with scientific language neuroscience, trauma theory, quantum physics.
And it's often delivered with a pretty hefty price tag.
That's the part that's so fascinating. We're seeing this shift from, say, a quiet communal Sunday service to the promise of a $2,400 retreat in Sedona.
Right, a retreat that guarantees you an instant energetic upgrade.
Yeah.
And that financial aspect is absolutely essential to this conversation. It signals that this fundamental human need, the search for meaning, has been fully absorbed into the consumer marketplace.
The moment the sacred returns, capitalism is right there waiting.
It's there to monetize it. So we have to explore the immediate dangers that poses to authenticity and how our modern mindset of optimization makes us, well, incredibly vulnerable to being sold a quick fix for the soul.
Okay, let's unpack that setup. Let's delve into the foundation of the problem, which is really the great broken promise of modern life. We were all sold a very clear contract, weren't we?
We were.
The idea was, if you apply yourself, get the right education, secure your financial freedom, and shed all those old stifling beliefs.
And embrace digital connectivity.
Right. If you do all that, you will be happy, you'll be fulfilled and emotionally stable. Life will be, for lack of a better word, managed.
That was the aspirational ideal. A life free from external constraint, dictated entirely by personal choice and optimized by data. But the reality is that maximized freedom, when you don't have a corresponding inner framework for meaning, it's created what is essentially a public health crisis.
A crisis of what?
Characterized by widespread anxiety disorders, profound identity confusion, and what you could only call optimized emptiness.
Optimized emptiness. I like that.
We were incredibly successful at removing the traditional structures, God, community, a sense of timeless morality. But the side effect was a culture of people staring at their phones, doom scrolling at 2 in the morning, wondering why they feel so profoundly empty.
Even though they have everything the material world promised them.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that is the core insight that really frames this whole dive.
We successfully dismantled the traditional source of meaning, but we completely failed to replace it with anything substantial enough to hold the human psyche.
We created a meaning vacuum the size of the internet.
And like any vacuum in nature, something has to rush in to fill it. So what did people pour themselves into?
Well, you see them substituting genuine meaning for productivity, demanding that external validation through constant professional achievement.
Exactly. Or turning to transactional sex, to dating app optimization, or becoming hyper-engaged in the sort of tribalism of politics.
And even basing their entire identity around past hurts, adopting what we might call trauma identities. All of those things provide a certain intensity, don't they? They feel meaningful in the moment.
But they're all zero-sum games. They rely entirely on external validation or maybe a temporary dopamine hit. They don't last.
Precisely. The critical function that all these fillers lack is genuine reciprocal love or transcendence. Productivity only matters until the next deadline.
And political zealotry only lasts until the next news cycle.
And the deeper you go into optimizing these external pursuits, measuring your sleep, quantifying your relationships, optimizing your financial portfolio, the more you realize they are fundamentally incapable of answering that one question.
Wow.
Why? They leave you with that optimized emptiness because they treat the soul like it's a spreadsheet. We become highly efficient, but completely directionless.
That brings us to another pillar of this whole modern search, which is the limits of therapeutic language. I mean, therapy has been an immense benefit for millions of people.
Absolutely revolutionary.
It provides a necessary toolkit for emotional regulation. It helps people name their wounds, understand their family patterns, and learn the vocabulary to express their internal state. It's been foundational.
It has. It's been a revolutionary tool for diagnosis, for emotional intelligence, and for self-understanding. But a growing number of people have hit a profound, almost philosophical wall with it.
What does that wall look like?
They reach a point where therapy risks becoming this exercise in, well, explaining your pain endlessly with no path toward transcendence. It becomes cyclical.
So the knowledge of the wound becomes the final destination instead of a waypoint on a journey.
That's it exactly. You can spend years understanding why you're anxious or why your parents behaved the way they did, and you can assign the perfect diagnostic label to it.
But the fundamental existential question is still there, isn't it? It remains unanswered.
Now what?
Now what? How do I integrate this suffering? What is the purpose of this pain, and how do I move beyond just naming it?
And that is the gaping spiritual gap. Traditional religion, mythology, wisdom traditions, for all their complexity, they provided answers for why one suffers.
They give you a cosmological narrative.
A narrative, a prescribed path forward through ritual, atonement, service, or devotion. Modern secular culture, stripped of all that, usually just provides a precise clinical label.
It tells you exactly what's wrong with the engine.
But it provides no map, no fuel, and no reason to drive the car anywhere.
And that distinction is so crucial. Therapy helped people stop the bleeding. It helped them understand the mechanics of their trauma and stabilize.
But it didn't give them a reason. It didn't give them a moral framework or a collective narrative to start walking again.
They need an answer that is bigger than their individual diagnosis.
Exactly. They need a narrative that transcends their individual neuroses and anchors them in a collective, timeless meaning. And when they look outward for that, they often realize they'd previously dismissed the very structures that tried to provide it. And that forces a look backward.
So if people are now turning back toward these spiritual frameworks, we have to spend some time analyzing why the previous systems they abandoned, what we're calling religion 1.0, why they collapsed so comprehensively.
And the evidence really suggests the failure was rarely philosophical. It was institutional. It was behavioral. People didn't typically reject the divine. They rejected the container it was served in.
The failure points were internal, they were systemic. You had dogma that became completely detached from any genuine depth or wisdom.
And institutions, driven by self-preservation and power, often focused on control without compassion.
Rules without wisdom.
And using shame as the primary mechanism for behavioral modification, rather than genuine healing and transformation. It just became about performance.
The real mass-scale revolt was against hypocrisy. It was against control.
When an institution's emphasis shifts to obey these external rules or you'll face damnation instead of transform and awaken to your highest integrity, it's just inviting revolt.
And people saw it. They witnessed leaders who preached austerity and morality but failed to embody those principles themselves. They were engaging in power abuse and just empty ritual.
So when you outsource your entire spiritual life to a hierarchy that prioritizes control over authenticity, you create a system that is incredibly brittle.
The moment that hierarchy gets exposed, whether it's through a sexual scandal, a financial scandal, political manipulation,
the whole framework just collapses. It leaves the believer with absolute philosophical and emotional homelessness.
and that vacuum was very quickly perceived by another powerful force that was seeking to provide ultimate answers.
Life or rationality.
And the elevation of empirical science to a kind of replacement religion. Now, science as a methodology for inquiry, it's spectacular. It has transformed human life.
Without a doubt. But for some, it was turned into a meta-narrative.
You saw this cultural trend where science was elevated not just into a methodology, but into a morality system, a core identity.
And a rigid, almost unquestionable replacement for faith. It became, for many people, the only intellectually respectable belief system you could hold.
And in doing that, it established its own set of dogmatic structures, which ironically mirrored the very systems it was trying to replace.
The parallels are stark when you look at them. You have your sacred texts, the peer-reviewed academic studies, which are often selectively interpreted or inflated in their significance.
You have your priests, the certified experts who must be deferred to without question, regardless of their disciplinary limits.
And of course, you have heresy, Any wrong opinion, any data point, any personal experience that runs contrary to the established secular narrative.
But surely the hyper-rational cohort has a point here, right?
Mhm.
If the search for meaning is so easily corrupted, as we're going to discuss with the commodification traps, isn't sticking strictly to objective data the safest, most intellectually honest position to take?
That is a fundamental challenge.
Isn't it better to have a firm foundation of how the world works, even if it leaves the why unanswered?
I think that leads us to the critical limitation of a purely data-driven existence. Science is perfectly designed to explain how the world works, the mechanics, the physics, process flows, data sets. But it cannot, by its very nature, address the profound universal human questions that define our subjective experience.
Right, you can measure the chemical reactions of love, but you can't run an empirical test on the meaning of sacrifice.
Exactly. Science cannot answer. Why do I feel this deep, irrational sense of purpose? Why does love, when it's lost, feel like a cosmic event and not just a neurotransmitter dip?
Or why do I feel profoundly empty sometimes on the very day I achieve everything I optimized my entire life for?
The data provides information, but it doesn't provide meaning, it doesn't provide wisdom or a moral imperative for how to live a good life. It leaves the human soul, for lack of a better term, cold.
The result is a society trying to live solely on data, and that leads to a deeply flattened reality. The infrastructure is incredibly efficient, the data is abundant, but the soul starves.
It starves because the poetic, the mythical, the existential dimensions of life have been scrubbed away as unscientific.
So the synthesis then is the realization that we are fundamentally dual creatures.
We need both. We need both components for a complete, resilient human experience. The how, which is provided by rigorous inquiry in science, and the why, provided by meaning, myth, and a spiritual framework.
And trying to discard one side always leads to a profound imbalance.
Whether it's the hypocrisy of religion 1.0 or the existential rigidity of science as a religion.
So this emptiness, which was fueled by the collapse of both the old faith and the rigidity of the new, that leads us directly to the current spiritual return.
But we have to emphasize, and the evidence really supports this, that this wasn't some casual, trendy choice. This was a forced inward turn. It was driven by mass-scale trauma and suffering.
That's a powerful and necessary reframing, that spirituality is often inevitable. Modern life, despite all its comforts, has traumatized people at scale.
It has.
We're talking about the instability of the gig economy, the complete fragmentation of traditional family structures, epidemic levels of loneliness.
And just the relentless noise and conflict generated by constant social fragmentation and digital overload.
We are profoundly safe and profoundly stressed all at the same time.
And this ties back to the ancient function of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Every single major, enduring wisdom tradition begins with suffering.
It's the starting point.
It's the starting point. It is only when external reality stops making sense, when your coping mechanisms fail, when your marriage collapses, when the job you defined yourself by evaporates, that you are forced to look inward.
To find something unshakable.
Exactly. People don't start meditation or breathwork because it's a cool trend. They seek it because the numbness they were relying on stopped protecting them. Chaos demands metaphysical order.
So the trauma acts as a kind of cultural catalyst. It cracks people open, as the saying goes. It forces the abandonment of superficial pursuits because they simply stop working.
And we absolutely cannot discuss this cracking open without addressing the major cultural catalyst of the last decade that has bypassed intellectual dogma completely.
Psychedelics.
Psychedelics. The undeniable truth is that millions of people, whether through controlled clinical studies or through accidental, recreational, or therapeutic experiences, have had irreversible, direct, lived experiences.
Experiences that prove to them.
That reality is fundamentally deeper, more interconnected, and frankly stranger than their rational materialist framework ever allowed.
And the sources highlight the common elements of these experiences, right? Ego dissolution, profound feelings of unity, of timelessness and transcendence.
And once you have tasted that unity, even for a moment, the previous nihilistic worldview becomes philosophically impossible to sustain.
The one that asserts nothing matters, we're just highly evolved biological machines.
You can't unsee it. It creates a fundamental cognitive dissonance. Your direct, profound experience now violently contradicts your previous intellectual dogma.
And that forces the search for frameworks.
It does. You've touched something real, something overwhelming, but you lack the vocabulary and the established tradition to integrate that experience into your daily life.
So this is the search that drives people back into the texts of Buddhism, the mystical paths of Christianity, Stoicism.
Even occultism. They're searching for a map to explain the land they suddenly found themselves in.
They're essentially searching for the spiritual user manual after having accidentally activated the operating system.
And finding their perception of reality fundamentally altered. And that profound hunger is immediately followed by danger.
Because the vulnerable searcher, cracked open by trauma and bewildered by transcendence, is looking for a guide. They're looking for a map, a community.
And the market is ready to offer all three, often in a beautifully branded, easily digestible package.
And this is where the critique gets truly sharp and targeted. The moment the sacred returns and people are genuinely searching for depth, capitalism is quick to try and monetize transcendence.
It is.
The critique we are seeing is that spirituality has stopped being defined by discipline or character development or consistent self-mastery. It is now marketed as an upgrade.
An upgrade or a lifestyle accessory. It's the shift from a long, arduous pilgrimage, which requires sustained effort and, let's be honest, often boredom, to a package deal promising enlightenment on demand.
And that shift appeals directly to the optimized, time-sensitive mindset.
We see this manifested in a whole new vocabulary. You see promises of instant frequency lifts, immediate kundalini activations, rapid DNA upgrades.
And quantum recalibrations.
Yes. Let's break down that language because it's crucial to understanding the marketing appeal. When someone promises a kundalini activation, they're referencing a powerful concept from yogic philosophy.
The coiled, latent energy at the base of the spine, representing the potential for spiritual evolution.
Exactly. And kundalini is traditionally awakened through years of intense breath work, meditation, and ethical living. It's the highest form of spiritual work, not something you pick up at a weekend workshop.
But when it's commodified, the promise is different.
The promise is, we will use a powerful technique to bypass the hard work, bypass the consistency, the discipline, and deliver the cosmic effects to you immediately.
And the quantum recalibration language aims for a similar effect, doesn't it? It's highly technical, almost pseudo-scientific language designed to sound advanced and highly specific.
And it suggests a quick fix that avoids the messy, complicated human work of actually changing your habits. The underlying promise is always the same.
You don't have to change your messy, difficult behavior, just tweak your vibration.
And the source labels this brilliantly. Spiritual Uber Eats.
That's perfect.
You're ordering your enlightenment, and it arrives quickly, demanding minimal effort or fundamental life change from you. It satisfies that modern desire for instant gratification, but applied to the soul.
So why is this commodified path so overwhelmingly attractive, particularly to the highly optimized, wealthy, or technically proficient people we mentioned earlier, the Silicon Valley types?
I think the key is the avoidance of accountability and consistency. True awakening requires consistency, integrity, discipline, and the painful process of facing one's own shadow.
Facing your terrible decisions, your profound immaturity.
That work is difficult. It's slow. It is often profoundly unglamorous and, frankly, boring to the hyperstimulated modern brain.
And boring doesn't sell a $2,400 retreat to someone who already optimizes their time down to the minute.
It doesn't. The commodified path sells an easy explanation that maintains the ego's comfort. It's fundamentally easier and more flattering to believe my lack of success in relationships is because I'm blocked energetically.
Or I just need a quantum recalibration to fix my career.
It's much easier to believe that than to confront the simple, hard truth, which is often, I keep lying to people I love, or I refuse to develop basic impulse control and delayed gratification.
So the spiritual marketplace sells a brilliant shortcut to avoid the hard work of accountability.
It does.
So if it's not lightning bolts and cosmic downloads, what does the source say true spiritual maturity actually looks like in practice?
Well, it's the anti-spectacle.
Huh.
True spiritual maturity looks like consistency showing up daily, regardless of how you feel. It looks like emotional regulation, the ability to hold discomfort without reacting destructively.
It looks like integrity, reliability.
And most importantly, radical accountability for one's choices. The outcome of this discipline is being grounded and ethical. It doesn't make you float above reality. It makes you profoundly capable of living robustly and truthfully within it.
The distinction, then, is that the fruit of true spiritual work isn't cosmic fireworks.
No.
It's being a reliable, ethical human being. And that realization should be deeply sobering for anyone who's looking for that easy activation button.
And even when people successfully avoid that immediate commodification trap, and they enter the new spiritual space with genuine intentions, the ego, that master shapeshifter, it doesn't just vanish.
It learns the new vocabulary.
It learns the new vocabulary. And this is how we end up with what we can only call Religion 2.0, now with crystals.
That is the perfect operational definition. People escaped the rigid external judgment of institutional faith, the whole "you're sinful" framework, only to land in the equally rigid internal judgment of "you're low frequency."
It is the same control mechanism, the same mechanism of hierarchical judgment, just written in a different font using Sanskrit terms.
The ego loves a good spiritual disguise.
Oh, it loves it. If it can no longer feed on status or money or crude power, it just reappears as moral or vibrational superiority.
I am more conscious, more awakened, and higher vibration than you.
It still creates a hierarchy. It's just ranked by perceived energetic alignment rather than institutional title or obedience.
And this sense of superiority often feeds directly into the love and light trap, which might be the most pervasive spiritual avoidance maneuver there is.
It's the idea that if you are constantly preaching positivity, you are often actually just suppressing genuine human conflict, confrontation, and necessary boundaries.
It's emotional bypassing, but it's disguised with candles and incense.
That's right. True healing requires facing and integrating the shadow aspects: grief, anger, fear, and necessary truth. If anger or the need to set a hard boundary or legitimate grief are labeled as low vibration,
Or blocking your frequency.
you're not achieving enlightenment. You're using spiritual language to enforce emotional suppression. You're enforcing a fantasy of constant positivity instead of confronting the complex reality of human emotion.
And this suppression is often reinforced within these modern spiritual communities, where the old dangers of power dynamics reassert themselves under the guise of shared energy.
Caution is paramount here. We have to be highly cautious of groups that promise expansion and belonging, but actually rely on control and dependency.
So if a community actively discourages questioning, if everything centers around one charismatic leader's vision,
Or if disagreement is framed as unconsciousness or betraying the energy of the group, that is not a path to liberation. That is just rebranded control.
the guru problem hasn't vanished in the internet age. It's just become personalized and digitized.
And if a leader claims to help you awaken and become autonomous, but simultaneously discourages independent thinking or encourages dependency on their approval or their ritual, you have found a fundamental misalignment.
Awareness, in its purest, most beneficial form, must expand your critical autonomy.
It cannot shrink it down to a dependence on a leader.
Hmm.
And there's a bit of necessary humor from the critique here. If someone sincerely says, "I'm not your teacher, you are your own guru," but then becomes visibly angry or shaming or threatens banishment when you decide to leave the group and follow your own path.
You've simply found God with an ego problem.
That's it. The goal of any legitimate path is liberation, not loyalty.
And we have to recognize the vulnerability of the people who seek out these communities. They're often lonely, grieving, disoriented, or dealing with intense burnout.
They're prime targets for a community that promises instant belonging and special status.
And they often replace a previous addiction, don't they? Whether it was chaotic relationships or substance abuse or workaholism.
They replace it with an addiction to belonging, to validation, to being seen as special within the group. The community becomes the emotional life raft, and the thought of leaving feels like a collapse of their entire constructed identity.
The belonging is intoxicating, especially in a fragmented world.
It is. And this is where that crucial distinction must be made between healthy, expanding connections and what we're calling trauma bonds, dressed up as soul families.
How do you tell the difference?
A trauma bond is characterized by intense emotional, cycling, dramatic closeness followed by chaos or distance. It's often mediated by a codependent need to fix or validate the shared pain.
Whereas a genuine, healthy soul connection
Is defined by consistent safety, psychological expansion, and the ability to tolerate disagreement or distance without the threat of abandonment. Not every intense connection is divine revelation. Sometimes the soul family is just a group of wounded people emotionally reinforcing each other's blind spots.
shared pain does not automatically equal shared wisdom.
And if your growth threatens the group's dynamic, you are stagnating together, not evolving.
Let's shift our gaze outward now. Let's show that this meaning crisis crosses all demographic lines. It strikes at the very top of the achievement pyramid. These high-profile case studies, they illustrate this universal hunger for structure and meaning when life becomes overwhelming.
They're cultural bellwethers. They prove that optimizing your external reality doesn't save you from inner turmoil. These individuals are highly visible, hyper-rational, or exceptionally creative, and yet they were all cornered by the same relentless existential questions that face everyone else.
Their success made them the ultimate test cases for the failure of materialism.
It did.
First, let's consider Russell Brand. His trajectory is a perfect illustration of that vacuum trying to be filled by hedonism, fame, political posturing, none of which worked.
And his turn, which has been very public, toward Christianity, toward mysticism, and a demand for personal responsibility and humility. It illustrates a desperate need for an organizing principle.
It's the idea that chaos eventually demands a morality.
When Brand had exhausted every possible avenue of narcissistic and hedonistic fulfillment, he realized he needed a structure, a morality, a spiritual commitment that was fundamentally bigger than his own fleeting desires.
Just to contain the massive inner forces that were driving him towards self-destruction and addiction.
His life required metaphysical boundaries that fame simply could not provide.
Then you have someone like Kanye West, a powerful example of raw, creative, destructive ego colliding directly with spiritual hunger.
His public pivot to religion and the intense contained structure of his Sunday service demonstrates a man trying desperately to contain inner forces that exceeded his own capacity for discipline or self-control.
The observation there is that religion is often where geniuses go when they can no longer outrun the intensity of their own being.
When your creative, emotional, and public power vastly exceeds your capacity for psychological discipline, you search for a cosmological framework to contain and direct that energy. It becomes a necessary containment structure against total self-immolation.
And perhaps the most telling example for the hyper-rational cohort is Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Here is a serious academic psychologist who spent his career meticulously analyzing mythology, chaos, and meaning. He tried to maintain a clinical, non-religious stance, but meaning itself eventually cornered him.
His intellectual inquiry led him inevitably back to biblical symbolism, to archetypal moral frameworks, and the definition of responsibility as a sacred, binding duty.
He realized that you can analyze meaning, chaos, and suffering for decades. But eventually, if you go deep enough, you have to encounter the realm that the sacred is meant to encompass.
He tried to define the map, and the map pulled him toward the territory of faith. He exemplifies how intellectual honesty can force a spiritual reckoning.
Finally, let's look at the quiet but profound shift among the Silicon Valley elites. This is the group that defined the worship of optimization, efficiency, and the public mocking of any traditional or spiritual belief.
And yet they are now deeply engaged in Stoicism groups, silent meditation retreats, and Buddhist philosophy circles.
This is maybe the ultimate indictment of efficiency as a life goal.
They successfully optimize their businesses, their bodies, their sleep schedules. But they realized that optimizing the infrastructure doesn't solve despair.
They had built incredibly fast, perfectly efficient systems.
But those systems had no moral direction or existential purpose. The result was still profound emptiness. Meditation didn't replace God, but it reintroduced silence, allowing the existential questions they had successfully optimized away to finally surface.
They learned that efficiency is useless without a guiding direction.
Given this intense hunger, the collapse of the old systems, and the proliferation of all these seductive traps, the commodification, the rebranded dogma, the codependent communities, we need a clear, rigorous framework for the listener.
A way to discern a genuine, life-affirming spiritual path from an expensive, ego-stroking distraction.
And the gateway to genuine spirituality, according to the wisdom traditions, is highly counterintuitive in our age of instant gratification.
The gateway is personal responsibility.
Absolutely. There is no activation, no $2,400 retreat, no ritual, and no mantra that overrides the basic requirement of choosing better partners, consistently telling the truth, managing your emotional impulses, and building basic foundational discipline.
The universe does not override consequences simply because you are a high vibe.
No. Enlightenment doesn't excuse immaturity, it mercilessly exposes it.
The tension here is between mastery and expression. Fake spirituality often says, express everything, your divine chaos, follow your impulse.
And real spirituality demands master yourself. That is the necessary discipline tension. Freedom without self-mastery is simply chaos and self-destruction.
Structure creates psychological peace.
And the deepest, most resilient freedom is found within self-imposed, meaningful constraints. The discipline of consistent effort, integrity, and accountability.
So let's provide that formal litmus test for the listener. If someone is evaluating a path or a teacher or a community, what does real spirituality actually look like in its practical outcomes?
Well, real spirituality consistently increases humility. It doesn't tell you how special you are. It exposes the ways you are still acting out of your ego.
It encourages relentless self-inquiry.
Asking the hard questions about yourself, your motivations, and your behavior. It strengthens discernment, the ability to tell truth from self-serving illusion.
Crucially, it makes you more grounded, more present, and more ethical in your everyday life, not detached or floating in some cosmic haze.
And it helps you face the messy, painful reality of the world and yourself, rather than providing an escape route.
And the red flags. What does a dependency trap or fake spirituality look like?
Fake spirituality immediately makes you feel superior to others. That I'm more conscious than you, therefore I can judge you trap.
It avoids discomfort at all costs.
Insisting on good vibes only and emotional bypassing. It aggressively discourages questioning the leader, the doctrine, or the group, centering everything around a single charismatic personality.
And ultimately, it creates dependency.
Dependency on external validation, external ritual, or the approval of the community for your sense of self-worth.
So the ultimate synthesis of this deep dive is a powerful realization. The goal of true awareness is to make you harder to control.
Harder to control by any external force, whether it's a dogmatic religion, a political ideology, or a commercialized guru.
Precisely. The future of genuine spirituality won't be characterized by spectacle, by loud pronouncements, or cosmic downloads.
It will be quieter, it will be more grounded and profoundly ethical. It will be defined by more embodiment, living the principles, and less performance. The essential return to the sacred must be predicated on reclaiming personal agency, consistency, and radical accountability.
And here is the foundational truth about the human condition. We are fundamentally meaning-making creatures. You can remove institutional religion, you can mock God, you can worship pleasure, or you can optimize your life away, but eventually you will bow to something that provides meaning.
The question is not whether this generation will be spiritual. The question that remains is, what will they worship? And will that chosen object or concept, whether it's productivity, a cult leader, or a true framework of meaning, will it actually save them?
The objective of this current spiritual return shouldn't be the fear of some external hell,
But the practical need for a framework that teaches us how to live on Earth without constantly destroying ourselves, our relationships, or our environment.
Awakening isn't about escaping reality, it's about finally becoming capable of living in it. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.